to the Copa Club podcast, where we will finish our Copa America mini-series alongside Tim Vickery, who are welcome back to the podcast. We haven't spoken in a while. Last time we spoke, Fernando Diniz had 2 jobs and he's lucky to have 1 at the moment, but we'll park that for today and focus on Copa America.
Maybe even nil.
Maybe even nil. We'll see, won't we? But
they're
Tim,
in the relegation zone, man. They're in the relegation zone.
I was out there recently and went to the Copa do Brazil game where they won 2-0, but the fans were still chanting for him to obviously be sacked, and that's the PG version from what I heard as well. But look, Tim, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Apologies for the Ronald McDonald shirt. It works extremely well with a jacket. It's a great shirt. It works very well with a jacket. But it's quite warm in here tonight, so I've just taken a jacket off. So you're just going to have to put some sunglasses on and on we go.
That's just for the people on YouTube. Don't worry about it. People won't know on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else. Look, let's start with Brazil. We'll just get straight into this. And look, we know they had a turbulent year. And again, that's probably the PG version in terms of the chaos, what's happened over the last 12 months or so, probably since the World Cup. But Dorival Jr.'s come in, obviously hugely successful with Flamengo, with the Libertadores, last season Sao Paulo with the Copa do Brazil. But this is probably not the... Brazil are used to bigger names, aren't they, really, in terms of Dorival Jr. coming in, and he's had mixed success with the 4 games he's played so far. Probably the highlight, the 1-0 win at England, Wembley, with a very sort of mixed team, considering the amount of injuries and players which weren't available to him. But he hasn't played the same team across the 4 matches. He's trying to figure out what to do, and almost a bit like Palmeiras, he's looking to Endrick to try and save him. What do you think about Dorival Jr.'s appointment and Brazil's chances? Because they seem very much like a team in transition. We almost have forgotten that.
Yeah, the big point to make before we start really about this Copa is that it's a godsend for coaches because they finally get a month together with their players. Now, this I think is more important than Brazil, perhaps, than for anyone else. But it's really important to all of them, with the possible exception, I think, including Argentina as well. You know, it was the shortest gap ever between the end of World Cup and the start of the next World Cup cycle. So all of the teams, bar Argentina, went into World Cup qualification after September absolutely undercooked, chaotic. Brazil more chaotic than anyone else. And it's hardly any surprise that after 6 rounds, Argentina are at top of the World Cup qualification table. And I mention the World Cup qualification table because the Copa is not the Euros. No one, you know, the South American teams don't build towards the Copa. Traditionally, the one who really builds towards the Copa is the host. But we don't have a South American host this time, so that's gone. You know, what this is, obviously everyone wants to win. This is the world's oldest continental competition. But what this is a chance for these coaches to spend time with their players. I mean, when World Cup qualification started in September, of the 10 sides, 9 were being coached. It was the first competitive game for their new coach, 9 of them. Of those 9, 5 have subsequently made a change, the 5 bottom teams in the table. So the godsend here is just a chance to spend a solid month with your players and emerge better for when World Cup qualification starts in September. We got bang, 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 another 6 rounds between September and November. So that really is more important. That's the most important thing, and it's especially important for Brazil. You know, who Fernando Diniz never should have accepted. It was lunacy to accept. It was a massive exercise in hubris. I said all this at the time. And Dorival Jr. is a much steadier hand on the till. Very easy person to underestimate. And he's been underestimated consistently. You know, you mentioned there the Libertadores with Flamengo, but he won the Libertadores, won the Brazilian Cup on a short-term contract, and then they didn't renew it. And he went off to Sao Paulo, and he won the Cup. He didn't have a great season, actually, but they won the Cup. And suddenly his name comes because they're desperate to find anyone. Is there a Brazilian coach? You know, there has to be some alternative to Ancelotti. And so the wheel of fortune spun to him. It's been a long career, long coaching career, and also as a player. But this is the first time he's ever done anything international. You know, it's all been in Brazil. So I think he's very, very much finding his feet. You mentioned there the win the win at Wembley. Spain, they got a draw, but there were times when they were being overrun in the game against Spain. Yes, with a lot of absences and so on. So this is the first time that he's got almost all of his players together. We don't know how much of a future Neymar has. Ederson, the goalkeeper, would certainly have a future if he was fit. I suspect he might be first choice, but there's no way of knowing. Friendlies, so he's had 4 friendlies, but friendly schmendly. Let's just to have a look. And there is one problem that we've seen in these friendlies, and we certainly saw last year in the World Cup qualifiers, which is the team that went to the World Cup under Chichi, and it was hard to have a shot against them, has been leaking goals all over the place. They would have lost to the US in the last friendly without Alisson, who came up big on a couple of occasions. They know this. They have identified this. And this is a priority in their training. And I would certainly expect them to grow throughout this tournament. I really think they're going to. I think with Brazil, you will see the benefit of a solid month training together, and I think they are one thing going into the tournament, and there'll be another thing coming out.
I think the success of Brazil in this tournament, a lot of people are talking about Vinicius Jr, who's had a wonderful season for Real Madrid, but he never turns up for Brazil. Like everyone's doing the comparison.
Well, that's harsh, I think. That's harsh. I mean, the team that went to the World Cup, it was a team that had been built without him. It was a team with one winger, Rafinha. And Rafinha took to international football in that qualifying process. I've rarely seen anyone take to it as quickly as he did. And so you had Rafinha one wing and you had Paquetá as a false winger. And that was the team. And then Vinny exploded. He was quite slow with Brazil, so he wasn't a first choice, or he didn't get a lot, and he didn't do very much. But in the end, they just couldn't leave him out. They couldn't, and so they ended up being a team with 2 wingers: Rafinha, who didn't have a good World Cup, and Vinny, who did. His best performances for Brazil up until that point came in the World Cup. The fascinating thing now is, because, as I'm saying, then he was a bolt-on. Now he's the fulcrum. He's the centre. This is his first tournament as Brazil's most important attacking weapon. And it really helps him and Brazil out, the fact that he's just had this season with Ancelotti, where, as he confesses, reluctantly, he was made to cut in more centrally. And he didn't want to do it. And Ancelotti asked him and made him and cajoled him. And he now says that was the year that he learned the most in his entire career. So let's see how that goes now with Brazil. Big tournament for him.
That's probably why Brazil wanted to get Ancelotti in. But that's, again, another different conversation for another day. And look, there's a lot of pressure there. You mentioned Neymar obviously not being at this tournament, so all eyes more on Vinicius Jr. But the guy to either his right or left or through the centre is coming off the bench at the moment is Endrick, who had that wonderful season with Palmeiras, and now all of a sudden he's scored the same amount of goals as Vinicius Jr. And we'll probably get on to another youngster later on with Ecuador in terms of, like, everyone can't wait to watch them in the Copa America. What's your thoughts on Endrick here, and do you see him starting at any point during the competition?
Oh, yeah.
Or is he?
Yeah, this is the big debate at the moment. When is he going to start? At the moment, the front three is Rafinha, Vinny and Rodrigo. With Rafinha wide right and Vinny and Rodrigo kind of alternating on the left. With some mobility there, and Paquetá getting close to them. So that's the team at the moment. And the speech coming out of Dorival is, look, let's take it slowly with him. Let's take it slowly. But the 3 goals he scored in the first 3 friendlies, what's striking about them is they're all so different. They're totally different goals. It really shows the range of his talent. And I'm sure during the course of a tournament, because tournaments are always like time speeded up. Sides suddenly fall apart. They suddenly come together. Players suddenly make themselves undroppable. But I would imagine that he's on the bench to start with. And if he can force himself in, great. If not, you've still got 90 minutes to win a game. And as he's shown in all these friendlies, he can do it coming off the bench.
He's probably the best option out of all the countries heading into this to have someone like Endrick on the bench. Let's move across to Argentina, a nation who lost 2 games in the last 55, I believe it is. One obviously being that incredible game against Saudi Arabia, but the other one was against Uruguay, where obviously Uruguay went to Buenos Aires and won 2-0. Bielsa showed a different side to... The question marks around Bielsa was his team not being able to keep clean sheets. We'll get onto Uruguay in a minute. Do you think there's any weaknesses in this Argentinian side? Because on paper, they are the heavy favourites. Obviously, Lionel Messi in the US, the journalists are all there with the headlines, ready for his sort of last dance, if you want to be cheesy, because that's all across social media at the moment. Do you think there's any flaws within this Argentinian side?
Well, the tournament's set up with them in one respect. The 2 halves of the draw, they are in by far the easier half. Yeah. For them not to reach the final, it's going to take a major shock. Are there flaws in there? Well, they very, very nearly lost the World Cup in the end because the centre of the defence collapsed. Now, they can't go on with Otamendi forever. I think one of the things you're going to see in this tournament is he is going to be replaced by the now fit again Lisandro Martinez of Man United. There can be a lack of defensive pace there. Uruguay did him on that a little bit, but also we're saying farewell to Di Maria in this tournament, and what a true great he has been. A really, really great player, with the added bonus that he doesn't seem to have much of an ego. He's always quite happy just to slot in and do what's necessary. He doesn't mind being in Messi's shadow. We still don't really know what's going to happen with Messi. The team has been Messi and his fan club, and it's still uncertain how long that can go on. And I was in the stadium last November when Argentina won away to Brazil. Messi, and he wasn't fully fit. They took him off before the end, like 15 minutes before the end. And it was the first time you looked at him and you thought, admittedly, he wasn't fully fit. They're carrying him a little bit. They're carrying him. And it was really significant, I think, that after the game, the coach, Scaloni, hinted very strongly at resignation.
Yeah.
He's since rode back from that position, and he said he went through a difficult time and so on. But this is a moment of triumph. This is the first time that Brazil have ever lost a World Cup qualifier at home. And Scaloni's all miserable and hinting at resignation. Now, my take on that, and it is an interpretation, is that one reason is that Scaloni is there thinking he's not going to be around. He's not going to be around for much longer.
Yeah.
And what do I do? What happens then? I don't want to do it. I'll give it to someone else. Maybe he's changed his mind since then. I don't know. But there's that still hanging over them. And I do kind of feel that for a lot of as I say, it's absolutely no surprise that Argentina are top of the table, because they were the only side with any kind of consolidated team going into the World Cup qualification. So obviously they had a massive advantage, and they're a terrific. I love watching them. I love it. And interesting that when Scaloni first took over, it was all France. It was all direct transitions, and he, to his great credit, he came to the conclusion pretty quickly that it was not an idea that fitted what he had, especially Messi. So he's built this side, lovely passing side, wonderful possession football. I'm really excited to see Lo Celso back, because he missed the World Cup through injury, and that means people haven't really seen it on a global stage. Perhaps just what a sweet thing him and Messi have. It's the relationship between them on the field is extraordinary. The way that Lo Celso can find him, and I love the way that they pass the ball and then suddenly there'll be a change of rhythm. I love that. On the debit side, I think there's an air that the past 18 months have been like a prolonged lap of honour. That they haven't seriously, because to seriously start building for 2026, you've got to answer the Messi question, and it's almost like no one wants a definitive answer to that one yet. So, the friendlies they played this year have been fairly meaningless. I know their friendlies in China got cancelled, which wasn't their fault at all in March, but they ended up playing, Central American sides where all the other South Americans were playing European sides. So is this the end of the lap of honour? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting with Scaloni. I don't blame him for potentially bowing out, and look, obviously with what he's won and obviously what he did with the World Cup, he can sort of leave Argentina at any point and he would always be welcome back, even if they crashed out in the Copa America group stage. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And as you said, the route to the final there, and the fact, and as you mentioned there, and you touched on Di Maria, like what an incredible season he's had domestically as well, and he just hasn't lost his pace either. I think we naturally get drawn to Messi, but the fact that you've got Di Maria there, and like you said, Lo Celso's coming back, but next to him, McAllister, Enzo Fernandez, arguably the best midfield trio in this competition. We could debate Uruguay's 3 in there as well. So yeah, look, really strong favourites, and I think it's just that side of the draw which makes their pathway so easy compared to Brazil, who may bump into Uruguay, or Colombia in their group makes that a little bit interesting as well. Yeah. We've touched on that Uruguay victory, so we must move on to talk about Bielsa and the impact he's had. When he first came in, it was very much a mixed sort of opinion as to his kamikaze football. Will it work with Uruguay? Will it not? Because he's so obviously aggressive going forward, but forgets about his defence. And that sort of crept in for the first 2 or 3 games. But then he showed, obviously, with that victory against Brazil, 2-0, clean sheet. Brazil didn't have a shot on target the whole game. And then to go to Buenos Aires and high press, put that a lot of pressure on Argentina throughout the game. I think Lionel Messi came out afterwards and said, we couldn't deal with it. And yes, I've mentioned that Argentina have only lost 2 in 55, but they may have to face Uruguay at some point. So that could be really interesting. What if he made?
Which could only be the final.
Bielsa? That would be a great final, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
I'd love to see that.
I totally understand why Bielsa was attracted to the job. Not only does he have an affinity culturally with Uruguay, but also there are similarities with the Chile side in 2007. Young generation, Uruguay are just going through that generational change. And look at the spine of the side. Araújo Jiménez, Ugarte, Valverde, Darwin Núñez, wingers, everything he wants. It's all there. And they are the in-form side. There's one thing that I think strongly mitigates against them. And that is, and this is a genuine concern for me, which is the heat. The United States is about... It's about to, this is the weather forecast, is about to have a prolonged and very, very intense heat wave. And if you look at a lot of the venues, in 16, they went to Philadelphia and Boston. They're not going back there this time. They're not going to Seattle. And those 3 cities are all hosting World Cup, I think. It's lots of cities in places where, it's cities that owe their existence as cities to the development of air conditioning. So in a heat wave, this worries me for this tournament. It worries me even more for the Club World Cup and the World Cup in 25 and 26, because then the games will be earlier than the Copa America games, because they'll be aimed at the European TV market. The games are a little bit later, although the first one is still kicking off relatively early. And the intense heat it's certainly a problem for Uruguay, and the intensity that with which they want to play, but I think it's a potential problem for the health of the players, and it's certainly a problem for the quality of the spectacle.
Yeah, it's such a shame, because obviously we don't get to see Bielsa ball in full effect, because people probably a European audience haven't watched the South American World Cup qualifiers and witnessed what we have. Even the demolition job over Mexico, 4-0 in a friendly. Yes, it was a friendly, but I think Bielsa only took 15, 16 players and played them off the park. But again, aggressive football, and they may not be able to do that in the heat. But I do want to touch on Darwin Núñez, because the enigma, right? For Liverpool fans, it's a bit like Marmite, but for under Bielsa, I thought what was really interesting when Liverpool beat Newcastle last season, and Núñez was the guy who scored those 2 late goals. He came out in his interview in a Liverpool shirt, obviously after the game, and said that he owed his sort of found confidence to Bielsa, not Klopp, which was quite interesting at the time. But look, he scored 5 goals in World Cup qualifiers, and we've just seen a different side to his game. And I think a lot of neutrals or Liverpool fans or European fans watching this will be like, Núñez up top for Uruguay, he's been a disaster in the Premier League. Under Bielsa, he's been mightily impressive.
But he hasn't, has he? He hasn't. He's done. He's done things. Just the Premier League fans, they can be so demanding sometimes. I said did an interview with a Chelsea website talking about Kendry Páez of Ecuador, and I said he's like a South American Phil Foden. And loads of fans were outraged. He's much better than that. He's going to be much better. You're just talking about the fella who's player of the season, for crying out loud, And also, the other obvious point, the Premier League, great though it is, it's not the be-all and end-all. There's another world out there. And the way that Bielsa loves his side to operate, he loves wingers who get round the back. I don't see too many inverted wingers with Marcelo Bielsa. He wants them to get round the back and get service in, and that's something that can bring the best out of Darwin.
Let's move across to Colombia, and there everybody's dark horses going into the competition with the unbeaten in 22 games, I believe, at the moment, the longest in international football at the moment. Nestor Lorenzo in charge, and if my research serves me well, Brian Clough tried to sign him as a player before he moved to Swindon Town, which I thought was really interesting. But look, wins over Spain, yes, admittedly in a friendly. Brazil in the World Cup qualifiers, admittedly in Barranquilla, which we know is sweltering hot. But in the friendlies,
a bit later. That was a bit later kickoff than they usually do, though. Barranquilla. I think Brazilian TV probably got its way with that. Quite often they play 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was considerably later, and they went a goal down.
And when I got so look, even more impressive. I was just trying to find maybe an excuse in there, which I didn't need to. But look, they hammered the US 5-1 in a friendly. When look, Brazil didn't do that; they drew 1-1 and struggled. And we look at their front four in terms of Luis Diaz, Rafael Borre, who's gone back to Brazil and performed well. John Arias, who I've been a fan of for a while, and James Rodriguez. Some fans are sort of on the fence, but he can still work it in the middle. There's a lot of attacking talent there, and they've been very aggressive in their friendlies of late. And they're just an exciting side heading into this. And with Brazil sort of finding their feet, they could finish top in Group D, and then that causes problems for Brazil if they have to face Uruguay in the next round. So it gets a little bit interesting. What's your thoughts on Colombia here?
Well, I think there are problems anyway, because even if they face the USA in the next round, it's either Uruguay or the USA. It's no foregone conclusion. It really isn't. Very, very impressed with Colombia. I think that there's one thing that they're lacking, and that's goals. And it's been a consistent Colombian problem. I mean, they missed out on Qatar because they went 7 consecutive games without scoring a single goal.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And I still think they're missing a centre forward. Santos Borré isn't quite there. I think he's all right. Borja, they've brought back Miguel Borja, who's doing well for River Plate, but I'm not sure. Duran is the great hope, but he hasn't crossed the line between promise and reality. So I worry about them not scoring enough goals, and it's amazing how much of a Colombian problem that can be. But what they are is exceptionally well coached, really, really well coached. Lorenzo is a class act. His side, they know where they want to win the ball. They're physically strong as well. They're not easy to play against. And he's found a formula with James. When James is an absolutely forgotten man. He's playing in inverted commas in Brazil for São Paulo, but they don't want to know him. He's played 10 minutes in the last 2.5 months. Coached 3 coaches, one of whom was Dorival. You've had a look and don't want to know him. And Lorenzo's found a way to make him function. It's quite a structured side, Colombia, but James can roam. And he'll often drop deep. And he doesn't quite have the express pace. I think that was one of the reasons when he went to Real Madrid, he didn't become the superstar. But you drop him deeper and he finds space, and he can be the supply line of Luis Diaz. So it's just been working. It's been working exceptionally well. And a thing that Colombia can always count on is support. There's always a massive traveling army of Colombian fans, and the Colombian community in the States is huge. There's a potential banana skin in there. In the history of Colombian football, the thing that they found it very hard to deal with is euphoria. Now, obviously, USA '94 is the obvious example, but I remember after winning the Copa America 2001, they didn't qualify for the World Cup. They couldn't take that into the World Cup. So that's going to be Lorenzo will have to earn his money, damping down the euphoria that's been created by this very impressive unbeaten run.
Let's go from an experienced number 10 to a 17-year-old number 10 in Ecuador and Kendry Páez. Just have a quick comment around Felix Sanchez at the moment, because I spoke to a few Ecuadorian journalists and experts, and at first, look, Felix Sanchez, Barcelona youth, went across to the Aspire Academy. Yes, it didn't work out with the Qatar project there, but a man who knows his football. But speaking more and more to Ecuadorian football fans, journalists,
they hate him. They want him out.
Yeah,
he's really under pressure in this tournament, although they've made a very solid start in World Cup qualification, and the fit is obvious because he did win the Asian tournament with Qatar, so he did.
And they were like outsiders as well.
Yeah,
so they were like
so he did leave something there, and that Aspire Academy, that's the methodology there is very, very similar to that of Independiente del Valle, the Ecuadorian club that's producing so many of the national team. But he's under pressure. They've been very solid in World Cup qualification. They made a good solid start. And this is a problem that applies to so many of the South American teams at the moment. Where are the goals coming from? They're utterly dependent on Enner Valencia. Utterly dependent on him. And Valencia was overplayed through 22 and 23. He played the season in Turkey with a great World Cup, a great season in Turkey, and then straight to Brazil. No break, straight through. And he's been paying the price for it this year. And he's at the veteran stage anyway. They haven't really got anything else. And also what they haven't got, which is a little bit surprising and a little bit self-inflicted, is one of the things that Ecuadorian sides have had so often recently, at club level as well, is quick, strong, direct wingers. They haven't really got any. There's one available. Gonzalo Plata. Gonzalo Plata is the wild child, very difficult to handle. He's very, very frustrating, but he had a pretty good World Cup. He's not there. We know why he's not there, because him and the centre back Arboleda took Kendry Páez in New York in March. They took him to a nightclub. They've both been dropped. So that's self-inflicted. He could have Gonzalo Plata, but Gonzalo Plata is being punished for this misdemeanor in New York, and so they can be a little bit lightweight up front. The friendly that they played against Argentina, they started off with Páez and Sarmiento of English football up front. Nothing. They couldn't get out of their own half because there's nothing to give them a platform. Enner Valencia came on for the last 30 minutes. Suddenly it's a different game. They're very, very dependent on him. And Kevin Rodriguez, I'm not sure he's 100%. He's been in Belgium this year. He's a little bit of a wild card. Jorge Caicedo, the other centre forward, is a physical beast, but I'm not sure there's great quality there. They are so rich in talent in some positions. Yeah, Minda he hasn't looked at all at home in international football so far. He's playing wide anyway. They're so rich in talent at centre back. They got so many good young centre backs, but at the other end of the field, they're not so well off. And as you said, they're under pressure because many in Ecuador I think are treating this as a kind of it's a referendum on the job security of Felix Sanchez.
Yeah, I've seen a few fans saying that they want to just lose and go out in the group stage just to get him out, which seems quite drastic.
It's such a... this is something, because I've only been there. I was there when they qualified for the World Cup for the first time, 2001. I was there for that, which was great. And given the fact that they've only played World Cups in the 21st century, they can be so demanding, such a demanding crowd. Not always easy.
But they're under a lot of pressure, and the one player who can save them, and it sounds quite mad to say if people haven't watched him, is a certain 17-year-old in that number 10 position.
I would probably say Enner Valencia is the one man who can save them, because I think he's still more important. You take Kendry out. Well, you can put in Angel Mena, who's at the veteran stage now, but he's a very, very clever little playmaker. Very clever player. You take out Enner Valencia, and there really is a dive. So I think Valencia is the most important player, certainly from an attacking point of view. Although we're all desperate to see Kendry in his first senior tournament.
Exactly, and look, Enner Valencia is going to need service, and Paez is hopefully going to give him that.
And Kendry needs service as well, because Kendry's so good at little give and goes. He's so good at them. So he needs, and this was a disaster of that friendly against Argentina when they didn't have anyone there. He's got no one to bounce off, So that relationship, Kendry and Enner Valencia, if they can get that right, then they've got an attacking threat.
He's formed quite a good relationship with Moses Caicedo. I don't know if that's just because obviously they're heading there to Chelsea, but in the qualifiers, it seems to have been Caicedo and Paez together carrying the side, but that's Paez either dropping a lot deeper than what he needs to, or Caicedo playing in a more advanced role than what he's not used to because of other players being absent or just not having the quality in that final third. But it does feel like Felix Sanchez is almost a dead man walking in this competition. But look, that opens the door potentially for Venezuela, who no one's really looking at in Group B. Now, obviously, the only South American side to not make it to a World Cup, but have looked
the only side in the entire 16 not to have gone to a World Cup.
Oh, also that, but they've looked promising so far in the World Cup qualifiers. Yeah. And in Group B, they've sort of been cast aside because everyone's expecting Mexico or Ecuador.
Don't cast them aside.
Definitely not. No, we did our Venezuelan podcast last week and I was convinced that they were going to win it. And I'm joking, convinced that they could easily get out of that group because they're one of the only nations, the only nation in that group heading without any sort of issues or off-field problems. And on it, that attacking third, I mean, people may laugh who haven't seen Salman Rondon since leaving Everton and what his time at River Plate was okay, but he's gone to Mexico and Pachuca and he's lit it up and he's coming into this.
I wonder here, I worry here how much this says about the current standard of Mexican football, because the evidence, not only at River Plate, but the evidence of the World Cup qualifiers was that, and he's reaching a veteran stage, he's in physical decline.
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite the player that he was. The tragedy of the last qualification tournament, the Qatar qualification tournament, was that Rondon was either in China or in England.
Yeah.
And because of COVID restrictions, they just couldn't get him back. And they were a totally different side with him, You take him away and they look lightweight. But I do worry. I've seen that the goals he's bashing in Mexico. But watching him last year, World Cup qualification, and he didn't dovetail in River Plate, which was a disappointment because it's a very attacking team. And a passing side, the opportunities for him to latch onto, and he wasn't quite getting there. So that's my worry for Venezuela. Again, where are the goals going to come from? They haven't been scoring that many.
Yeah.
I know that the coach Batista has been concentrating on defensive solidity, and he's been doing an excellent job with that. I still think they're just a little bit short of quality.
I'm not here jumping to defend Venezuela here. I completely agree with your thoughts there. But look, Botafogo Savarino on one side, Gremio Soteldo on the other side. He's going to get service. And I just think they could surprise a few teams, especially in Group B, where everyone's expecting outside in anyway, Mexico and Ecuador to dominate that group. I just think it'd be foolish to write Venezuela off.
Certainly would, and certainly would be foolish to automatically assume that Mexico are going to qualify.
Yeah, well, look, let's get into that. The teams invited, and let's focus on the main three there: US, Canada, Mexico, the CONCACAF teams against CONMEBOL. Their friendlies have been really interesting because the US, Canada, and Mexico, they all got battered in separate friendlies. Like Mexico lost 4-0 to Uruguay, Canada 4-0 to the Netherlands, the US 5-1 to Colombia. But then they all came out and then did quite well in the second games in terms of, yes, Mexico lost to Brazil 3-2, Endrick in the last minute, but almost held them.
It was Brazil's reserves.
0-0. I'm trying to sort of add a bit of positivity to them. But do you think during Copa America here, we'll see and notice more of the huge gulf between CONMEBOL sides and the other 6 nations who are coming along?
No, not necessarily. Certainly not from the USA. I think the 5-1 against Colombia. Take away the substitutes parade in the second half, and it's a different result. When Colombia got off to a great start, 2-0, the States pull one back, and at 2-1 it's a game. And then you get all the substitutions, and the US substitutes made mistakes. Colombia they know when to press and where to press, and they really punished them last few minutes. USA showed far more, I think, when they didn't make so many changes and looked for a response in front of their own fans against the USA. I think the USA are amongst the candidates who can go all the way in this tournament. I think they're quite impressive. Canada, I don't know a great deal about. I really enjoyed them in the World Cup. The first game against Belgium, which I thought they were fantastic. But again, like a lot of the South American sides, you look at the team, you think, where are the goals going to come from? And they didn't come against Belgium, and they were unlucky. And then they made a mistake against Croatia. They're under scoreboard pressure now. They lost the first game. They went too open against the midfield that you couldn't do that against, and they got hammered. I saw the game against Holland, which was the first game under Jesse March. And it's first game, and it was 0-0 at half time. But you could see in that game that they weren't sure about where to press. And that's what did them in the second half. Now, they've obviously subsequently worked long and hard on that, and they held France to a 0-0. So I'm intrigued to see what they do against Argentina in the opening game. But their chances, I think, are hindered. They could pull off a Saudi Arabia, but their long-term chances are hindered by the fact that Alphonso Davies aside, you can't really see where goals are going to come from. With the States, you can. You know, Pulisic, for example, Balogun. Balogun is a talent, a real talent. Where there's some firepower there. So I actually think there are 4 sides in that half of the draw who are capable of going all the way.
Which and the 4 nations are
Brazil, Colombia, Uruguay, and the States.
Yeah,
get a little bit of momentum behind them, and I wouldn't rule out the States.
Okay, very interesting. Look, we've signed off every episode in this particular podcast with some quick fire questions, so of course I have to throw them your way, Tim. And just straight in, who do you think is going to win Copa America?
I was asked this the other day and ended up thinking on my feet, thinking maybe Brazil. Just because I think they're a side who can benefit so much from having a month together. And that counterattack, when it goes, that really, really takes some stopping. And in a Brazil-Argentina final, I can see them causing the Argentina defence some serious problems. The heat could benefit them. They are worried about the pitches, Brazil, the size of the pitches. Now, these pitches, they're smaller than, considerably smaller actually, than FIFA usually allow, and they think that's going to harm their chances. So it's one thing that they're preparing for. But I'm not a supporter. No, living in Brazil doesn't make me a Brazil supporter. But I fear that counterattack. And I think if they can sort out the defensive solidity, There's some real talent there up front.
Who do you think the player of the tournament will be?
Ooh. Well, if I've said Brazil, then I think I'm going to have to say Vinny. And we said earlier on, it's his first tournament as the main man. Not that I care about it one bit, but it's important for his Ballon d'Or claims, especially with the Euros happening as well. So it's going to be Vinny's tournament.
And last two, your dark horses? I think I know where you're going to go here.
Well, I suppose Colombia are a dark horse. I suppose they're quite a light coloured dark horse, really, because they've been unbeaten for so long.
Yeah.
But if they can cope with euphoria, and Lorenzo spent so long as an assistant. It's only in his 50s. All right, I'll have a go at this coaching lark. And first with Melgar in Peru, and now with Colombia, both have been spectacular jobs. So he obviously really knows what he's doing.
Last question. It's a negative one. I don't know why I've left this one till last, but potentially the biggest disappointment in Copa America.
I don't know. Disappointment. I mean, Peru, I suppose, but I wouldn't really class it as a disappointment. I don't expect anything from them.
Probably expected. See, I'm leaning towards Mexico. Just
from what
I've seen.
Yeah.
We'll throw Mexico in. Yeah. I'm sorry, I felt like I finished the podcast on a bit of a downer there. But look, winners, Brazil, dark horses, Colombia. You've heard it here from Tim. Look, Tim, thank you very much for your time.
Leading scorer, I'm going to go with Darwin.
Darwin Núñez, yes.
Yeah, and Uruguay score more goals than anyone else. And he gets lots. And look at the group. Bolivia and Panama. Yeah.
And it sort of played out quite well because the US is last, so they may need a point to finish top. So they're going to play him. So I think that's worked out really well. So, okay, Brazil win it. Darwin Núñez, Golden Boot. Biggest disappointments, Peru/Mexico.
Done.
All right, Tim,
Done deal.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. My pleasure.